Good evening. Especially with so many people's lives being quite disrupted right now and unable to attend their regular shiurim or chavrusas. So I've decided to add, besides the Gemara class that I'm teaching in the morning, to spend the next few weeks sharing with you some insights on the Haggadah. What I'm going to attempt to do, rather than sharing kind of the standard insights on the Haggadah that you heard first when you were in second grade, and again when you were in third grade, and again in ninth grade and 10th grade, my goal is to be trying to offer some, shall I say, off the beaten path commentaries. I'm going to more or less go in order through the Haggadah. So each night trying to cover a certain small section and then moving on the following night. The Haggadah begins with Kadesh, the recitation of the Kiddush, following which we drink the first cup of wine. In the Gemara in Maseches Psachim, there is an interesting machlokes, an interesting disagreement. According to one opinion, the first two cups of wine, you are required to recline while drinking them. Just by way of reference, when it comes to eating the matzah, we are required to recline at all times when we're eating matzah. But when it comes to drinking the wine, the first opinion brought down in the Gemara says that for the first two cups of wine, a person is obligated to recline. And the Gemara explains why. Because that's when the freedom is beginning. But the latter two cups of wine, it's not necessary to recline. Why not? Because my dahava hava, whatever happened, happened. Sort of like the freedom is old hat already. Va'amrula, but there's another opinion that says that the latter two cups of wine require reclining because that's the time that the person is actually in a state of freedom. But the first two cups, no drinking wine yet, because that's when you are saying avodim hayinu. That's when you're mentioning the fact that we were slaves. So in the Sefer Hazmanim, a commentary on the Haggadah by the Bais Yaakov of Ishbitz, he explains the two opinions. And he says that when you're drinking the first two cups of wine, that's when the stirrings of freedom you're starting to feel. However, at the same time, we're still in a state of slavery. But he says that when you're in slavery, and at the same time, you're starting to feel freedom, that's the strongest feeling of freedom that you're ever going to have. But by the time that you get to the last two cups of wine, and those represent the time of total freedom, by that point in time, you've already forgotten what it means to be a slave. And therefore, you don't appreciate the freedom as much as you would have appreciated it previously. And he gives an example. He says, if a person is really, really hungry, so as he begins to eat, even though he's not yet in any way feeling full and satisfied, still the fact that he's hungry, that's what makes him really appreciate the food that he has to eat. But by the time he's finished eating and he gets on the table, he feels all full, he doesn't have the same appreciation for the food because he no longer has that feeling of hunger and that feeling of need. So he says that that's the disagreement over here between the two opinions in the Gemara. The first opinion says that we should recline as a sign of freedom during the first two cups, even though at the time we're drinking the first two cups of wine, we're still focused on the slavery and we're only just beginning to taste the taste of freedom. But that's the time to recline, to really show your appreciation for the freedom, because freedom coming out of slavery, that's when it's most appreciated, but not later on. Whereas the other opinion says, no, if you have freedom, but still you have a taste of slavery, that's not real freedom yet. So that's not the time to recline. And the only time to recline is later on when you are fully, completely, and totally experiencing the freedom. Now, as we move on to the Hagaddah, the next thing in the Hagaddah after Kadesh is Karpas. Karpas, of course, is when we take a vegetable and dip it into some salt water and we eat the vegetables. Some people take celery, some people take potato. And over here, I want to share with you an insight from a sefer called Limudim Benisim. This is an absolutely fascinating sefer, which I purchased last year. It has a section about Hanukkah, about Purim, and about Pesach, three great miracles that the Jewish people experienced. And he has a very unique style of gematrios and other, I'm going to call it wordplay insights, in order to bring out some very profound points. So I want to share with you two ideas that he says over here. First of all, when it comes to Karpas, he says that, again, there's actually a bit of a disagreement when it comes to Karpas. What exactly is it symbolizing? Is it in some way a symbol of the slavery, or is it a symbol of the freedom? And he clearly understands it as a symbol of freedom. He says that it says in Sefer Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, Vayotziacha b'fanav, that Hashem took you out of Egypt before himself, b'kocho hagadol, with his great strength, mi Mitzrayim, from Egypt. And of course, what did the Egyptians suffer? What was this kocho hagadol? What was that great strength? The great strength was exhibited in the Eser Makos, in the 10 plagues, which Hashem brought on the Egyptians. So he points out that if you take the word bikocho, Bais, Kaf, Ches, Vav, and you multiply each one of those letters by 10, you get the letters of Karpas, to represent that the kocho that Hashem used is symbolized in the Karpas. If you take Bais and multiply it by 10, you get the Chaf, which is the first letter of Karpas. Chaf, and you multiply it by 10, so Chaf is 20, multiplied by 10 is 200. That's the Resh of Karpas. The third letter of Bikocho, the Ches, that is Gematria 8, multiplied by 10 is the same Gematria as the letter Pei, 80. And finally, Vav, the last letter in Bikocho, that's the Gematria of 6. Multiply it by 10 and you get 60. And then you have the Samech of Karpas. He then moves on to Yachatz. Yachatz is when we split the middle matzah. Now, you may be familiar with the idea that the three matzos represent the three groups of the Jewish people. The top matzah represents the Kohen, the middle matzah represents the Levi, and the bottom matzah represents the Yisrael. So he says, first of all, that the word Yachatz shares the same gematria, the same numerical value as Bain Levi, which he understands to mean that in the middle is the Levi. And he says that the top matzah, which represents the Kohen, and the Kohen symbolizes chesed. It symbolizes the unlimited kindness of Hashem. And the Yisrael, the bottom matzah, symbolizes Rachamim, Hashem's mercy. And if you add together the gematria of Chesed and Rachamim together, they add up to the same numerical value as the word Shalem, whole. So that's why the top and the bottom matzos remain whole, because that's Chesed and Rachamim, kindness and mercy blended together, is the gematria again of the word Shalem, of whole. Levi represents Gvura. Now, Gvura, which literally means strength, but in Kabbalistic terms, the word Gvura represents the concept of creating divisions. And so he points out that the word Gvura is double the gematria of the word Chatzi, of half. So that's why we take the middle matzah and we break it in half, and we're taking the Gevura and breaking it into two chatzis, into two halves. And finally, he says that at the beginning of Parshas Korach, and Korach was a Levi, so it begins Vayikach Korach. So the Targum translates the words Vayikach Korach as V'ispalag Korach, which means that Korach created a division. He took something and broke it into two. As we said, that's the Koach, that's the power of Shevet Levi. And he says that those words, Vayikach Korach, Korach took, that if you rearrange the letters, you can spell out Resh Yud Vav, and then Kuf Ches, and again Kuf Ches. So Resh Yud Vav is the same gematria as the word Gvura, which again we said is the power of division. And then Kuf Ches, two equal numbers that are both the same gematria as the word Chatzi. Because again, that is the Koach, the power of Shevet Levi, to create that break and create that division. As we move on now, I'm going to share with you something from what I consider to be the greatest Hagaddah ever written. This is a Hagaddah called Bais Avraham, Bais Aaron, and this was actually written by somebody. He wrote 9 separate commentaries on the Hagaddah, each one in a uniquely different style, and much of it was written as he was being shunted back and forth from home to a slave labor camp in Hungary during the war. Ultimately, he ended up dying in the camp, but somebody managed to preserve the manuscript of the Hagaddah, and it was printed many years after the war. And this person was quite clearly not only had a tremendously wide range of Torah knowledge, but his creative genius is not to be believed. So again, going back to the word Karpas, so he mentions that the Sefer Maaseh Hashem says that the reason why we dip the vegetable in the tears during Karpas is to remind us of the sale of Yosef. That just like the brothers dipped Yosef's garment into blood, and that act ended up precipitating the exile in Mitzrayim, so to symbolize that and to remember that, we dip the Karpas into the salt water. So the Beis Aaron, Beis Avram, in his commentary called Pe'er Aron, says that that's why if you take a look at the word Karpas, you can break it down into two words. First of all, the word Kar, we find Yaakov Avinu says, uses a word karisi, and that means that I sold. Or in Hebrew, generally, selling and buying is the same word. It just means really I engaged in a transaction. So kar is a transaction, and pas shares the same root as the kusones pasim, the coat of many colors that again precipitated Yosef's sale. So again, with the idea from the Maaseh Hashem that the dipping of the Karpas is to remind us of Yosef's garment being dipped in blood, we eat the Karpas, which indicates sold because of the Kesones Pasem. We'll continue Mr. Hashem tomorrow evening. Thank you.